At the end of the last episode of Series 8, Jez and Mark have a big fallout over Dobby, and as we find out in the first episode of Series 9, have stopped living together for a period of time. Jez hasn't seen Mark for 6 months prior to them seeing each other at Hans' stag party in the juice bar.
I haven't seen Mark for 6 months.
And as we find out, he has been living with Hans and his fiancée, the newly introduced Molly.
Come on through.
He's staying in their bathroom, sleeping in the bath, or as Jez says,
I think of it as a sunken bed.
and his kitchen is a kettle and a few bits on a tray underneath the sink, precariously close to a bottle of bleach. And as Jeremy has been living with Hans, it's obvious that they would have spent quite a bit of time together.
You're living here with Super Hans and his fiancée.
So now let's go back to the juice bar at the start of the episode and Jez and Mark's entrance. The pair meet outside and then walk in together, leading to this line of internal dialogue by Jeremy.
Oh my god, he's cleaned up for the wedding. Iggy's gone to rehab. Sober Hans.
What? Jez is surprised that Hans isn't the
Excuse me, Hans, the crack-addled maniac
that he once was previously, and is now a completely sober, juice-drinking, funny t-shirt loving Zoella fan. But as we now know, he is literally living with Hans, and so would see him every single day. So how would Jez not know that Hans is sober now? When Mark and Jez walk into the juice bar and see Hans, they both act like they haven't seen him in ages, yet we now know that this can't possibly be true for Jeremy, as they were likely both inside of the very same house just a mere couple of hours ago. So, what's going on here exactly? Well, the cynic in me says that this was an oversight by the writers, as it seems like a kind of small detail that you could overlook quite easily. The whole Jeremy being introduced to Hans bit in the juice bar is literally just that single sentence in which he's shocked that Hans is sober, and after that it just immediately cuts to a transition shot before returning us to the juice bar. Honestly, the line is pretty pointless anyway, and can be removed easily with no effect on the episode at all. But even if we were to pretend that Jez wasn't living with Hans, and he was living somewhere else instead, it still doesn't even really make sense as to why Jez wouldn't have seen Hans anyway. It was Mark that he had a fallout with, not Hans, so why would Jez not have seen Hans for such a long time anyway? I don't see why him fucking up Mark's relationship with Dobby would have any effect on his and Hans' relationship. Anyway, back to the real question here. As I said, I kinda want to say this whole issue was just an oversight by the writers.
That's it.
That's it.
But to make things more interesting, let's look at it as though it wasn't a mistake. Jez is living with Hans and has been for some time, yet is completely unaware of him being sober. How could this be explained? You could say that maybe Hans has been hiding this change from Jeremy, and that when Jez thinks Hans is going out to do drugs and drink away from Molly, who clearly doesn't like those things,
she'll break it off if she finds out I've been coking.
he's actually going to juice bars and the like, though that would still be kinda stupid. My best theory here is that Jez knew that Hans was presenting this idea that he had sobered up and kicked the drugs and alcohol, but presumed it was only a front to try and hide his true lifestyle from his fiancée Molly. As I said before, the ironically named Molly really doesn't seem to like drink or drugs, a stark contrast to the kind of person you'd expect the Hans we know to be engaged to. So maybe Jez thought that he was merely pretending to be a juice-loving free spirit to try and appease her, and then when Jez sees him legitimately out at a juice bar on his stag do, loading up on juice,
Here we go, lads. More juice.
he finally realises that it wasn't a front, and that Hans really had sobered up. That really is the best theory I can come up with here because, well, there's almost nothing to go off. It's one of those cases where there's very little room for theory crafting, as it leans more towards being a continuity error than being intentionally vague or open-ended. I'm interested to see if anyone else has any ideas about how you'd explain this problem in a way that would make sense within the logic of the show, so feel free to share your theories, because intricately analysing offhand lines of dialogue in TV shows is definitely normal.
It is. It's all totally normal.